The false prophet follows Mahmoud Fall, a charlatan from Senegal who travels throughout West Africa, ultimately ending in the country of Bilals. Mahmoud Fall, now going by his alias Idra, believes these people were his inferiors and used the fact that he studied the Quran in Mauritania to exploit their religious beliefs for his own profit, making people house and feed him along with demanding patronage for his service. On his journey towards the Atlas Mountains, paranoia gets the best of Mahmoud, causing him to bury his treasure. He then immediately passes out, failing to pray, and is robbed while he is sleeping. He wakes up to all of his treasure missing, and shaved head and beard, leaving him right back where he started.
The jungle follows our protagonist, simply referred to as a man living in East Africa. Man and animal live together in apparent harmony. However, during an intense storm, an elephant seeks shelter in the man's house, first asking if he can protect his trunk from the hailstorm. Slowly but surely he edges his way into the hut, ultimately kicking the man out of his own house. Following this, the man complains to the king of the jungle, and he assembles an unbiased commission of inquiry, consisting only of animals, to discuss the matter. It is ultimately concluded that the elephant commanded the hut in the man's best interest to prevent it from blowing away. The man then builds a new house, and the process is repeated with the same verdict every time. Soon enough, the man has enough and builds a bigger and better hut, which is soon occupied by all the jungle lords, and a dispute of the rightful ownership ensues. Meanwhile, the man lights the hut on fire, burning all of the jungle lords alive, finally achieving peace and living happily ever after. Both stories follow a pretty similar standard story structure, starting by prefacing the scenario the book will explore and main character. Next, we have the rising action, followed by the ultimate conflict, and ending with the resolution. For the prefacing, the false prophet we are introduced by Mahmoud Fall. His background in religion and his desire to be rewarded without doing work, just like a cat, as he explains it. In The Gentleman of the Jungle, we are introduced to the man and his elephant friend.
In The False Prophet, Mahmoud Fall begins to go by Idra and starts posing as a prophet to exploit locals for personal gain. In The Gentleman of the Jungle, we see the elephant forcibly evict the man out of his home and the commission of inquiry being assembled. The false prophet's main conflict is Mahmoud's own internal conflict of whether to pray or give in to his greedy desire to bury and protect his treasure. The Gentleman of the Jungle's main conflict is the repeated unjust verdict taking the man's home over and over again.
In The False Prophet, the ultimate resolution is the robbery of Mahmoud Fall and the shaving of his head and beard, ultimately delivering justice. In The Gentleman of the Jungle, the final resolution is the trapping of the Lords of the Jungle in the new and improved hut and their death. This ultimately delivers justice for the man who was wronged.
The False Prophet explores the after effects of colonization of West Africa, which is embodied as the influence of Islam. The spread of Islam enabled Mahmoud Fall to exploit religious beliefs to gain social power and wealth. The story also explores themes of justice and how exploiting others will eventually catch up to you. The Gentleman of the Jungle heavily relies on the post-colonial lens and emphasizes the disparity of social power between the natives and the colonizers. The lack of social power is reflected within the committee's repeated decision in favor of the animals of the jungle, which represents the colonizers. The story also incorporates a biographical lens as the author grew up in post-colonial Kenya and first-hand experienced the inequality of being a native.
The Gentleman of the Jungle is extremely effective in its portrayal of post-colonial Kenya. The story deconstructs post-colonial society and utilizes animals to make a clear distinction between colonizers and natives of society. This is further reflected by the choice of hostile animals to portray the danger posed to natives by colonizers.
The false prophet might appeal more to Muslims or followers of Islam, as the resolution of the story helps enforce the importance of prayer. A Muslim audience might also relate closer to the Prophet of Islam and how they would react.
Contemporary Matter follows a couple who loses their child at birth, driving a wedge in their marriage. For months to follow, they rarely interact, diving deep into their work to avoid one another. This is until a power outage forces them to interact and talk, as they are no longer able to seek refuge from each other by delving into their work, as each require power This is until a power outage forces them to interact and talk, as they are no longer able to seek refuge from each other by delving into their work, as each require the power to be on to do so. They start confessing things they have never told anyone, which helps them get close and open up. Towards the end of the story, they open up about their lost child, which seems to almost fix their marriage entirely. However, once the power is restored, they go back to avoidance, making their bonding a truly temporary matter.
The story follows Bibi, a young woman who has suffered from inexplicable seizures and fits of dysphoria all her life and her isolation from society. The only family she has is her cousin, whom she lives with. Bibi had been exposed to many different types of treatments, none of which worked. Following the birth of her cousin's son, she is banished to live in the back room of her cousin's store to ensure she doesn't spread her disease onto their son. In the back of the store, she is raped by an unnamed rapist and gets pregnant. She decides to keep the child, which ultimately cures her inexplicable disease. Temporary matter is prefaced by the death of the couple's baby at birth and the downfall of their marriage, including their avoidance of each other. The treatment of Bibi Haldar is prefaced by the introduction of Bibi and her inexplicable disease, and how it has affected her life until the point of the story.
A temporary matter's rising action starts when the couple are informed to the impending power outage and their confessions to each other. The rising action of the treatment of Bibi Haldar is her banishing from her cousin's house and deteriorating condition following the birth of her cousin's son. The ultimate conflict in A Temporary Matter is a shouting argument the couple get into regarding their dead child, which brings them even closer than before. The ultimate conflict in the treatment of Bibi Haldar is when her friends and cousin learn that she was raped and is expecting a child.
The resolution of a temporary matter happens when the power is restored to the house and things go back to how they were before, and their ultimate divorce. The resolution of the treatment of Bibi Haldar is now of a more positive note, with the curing of Bibi following her son's birth. The matter explains the psychological lens, showcasing the effect on a couple following the death of their child. The tragedy that shattered their lives after months of preparing to bring a child into the world was too much to handle and results in a big psychological change, causing the couple to fall out of love. The readers can interpret that the couple's subconscious blame placed upon each other ultimately destroys their marriage.
Personally, I disagree with how the couple handled the miscarriage. During a time of mourning and immense sorrow, I imagine I would rely on my spouse, causing me to grow even closer to them.
Bibi Haldar is placed in a traditional feminine role in her desire for a husband, so that she would be spoken for, protected, and placed on her path in life. This implies that Bibi is unable to do this herself and requires the assistance of a man to give her life meaning. Using the psychological lens, we can infer that her lifelong isolation and being constantly disregarded by men as wife material further encapsulates her into the mindset and desire to find a man. The psychological lens is further explored with the story's theme of mental illness and how the dependence of another life on her caused a miraculous cure for her illness, further proving that the illness was only psychological to begin with.
A Temporary Matter might appeal more to individuals or couples who have personally experienced the tragic loss of a child and can relate their own experience to that of Shoba and Shakumar. The treatment of Bibi Haldar explores mental illness. Throughout the story, Bibi is disregarded simply as being sick rather than mentally ill. The story reflects the ignorance and unawareness of mental illnesses' presence in society. The topic, however, is taken seriously throughout the story. Both The False Prophet and The Gem of the Jungle explore themes of justice. Mahmoud Falls ultimately served justice when he loses everything due to his exploitation of people. The man in The Gem of the Jungle takes justice into his own hands, luring and killing the animals. Both stories also feature themes of exploitation, however differ in the people's reaction to it. The man in The Gem of the Jungle realizes he is being exploited and consequently fights back. The Muslims in The False Prophet, however, never realize they are being taken advantage of and proceed to give almost all their belongings to Mahmoud Fall.
Temporary Matter and the treatment of Bibi Haldar, there is one distinct commonality that trumps all else, but its implementation is entirely different. In both stories, a baby completely changes the protagonist's lives. For Temporary Matter, the baby and its impact is introduced in the beginning of the story, setting the tone and revealing the reason for their failing marriage. In the treatment of Bibi Haldar, the baby is introduced at the very end of the story and changes Bibi's life for the better, curing her ailment. Both stories highlight perseverance, with the couple working through the tragic loss of their child, but their relationship ultimately fails. However, Bibi's perseverance, especially following her rape, allows her to rid the problem that has followed her since childhood.
The False Prophet, The Gem of the Jungle, and the treatment of Bibi Haldar all share themes of exploitation. Mahmoud Fall takes advantage of people's hospitality just like how
Bibi Haldor would take advantage of physically. The man in the gym of the jungle is exploited by animals time and time again until he finally seeks vengeance. It seems that exploitation and oppression are intercontinental struggles. All these stories also exhibit acts of violence that help in the resolution of their stories. Mahmoud's robbery, the burning of the Lords of the Jungle, and the rape of Bibi Haldor.